Hey, everybody. David Bloom here with Next TMT Talks. This week, Walmart was all set to take over the TV operating system universe when it bought Vizio. We are still waiting. Not waiting. Paramount sues Amazon because employees are leaving a place that likely will lay many of them off. Figure that one out. Pat McAfee signs a fat ESPN contract, then uses tips from Shams Charania to make a lot of money betting on LeBron's new landing spot in Philly. Maybe Elon shouldn't count on help from Charter to live his Starlink supremacy dreams. And maybe no one will care about his AI-only Odyssey movie, though a different one with a far different attitude is arriving in a few weeks. Finally, Peacock finally learns how to fly financially, turning a profit 6 years after it launched.
Yay!
We should all give big hosannas for that. But will it continue? Anyway, I'm here with Daniel Frankel, my co-founder at Next TMT and my co-banterer here at Next TMT Talks for our flagship edition of the week. So, Dan, you want to start? You had some pensée, as they like to say in France and at Versant, about Walmart and the Vizio deal that was supposed to transform the TV OS world, but we're still playing in Roku's world, not Walmart's, shockingly enough.
Yeah, our good friends at Hub Entertainment Research, our sponsors, released another study this week, an annual look at how folks watch the TV screen. And it had a survey question for the 2,500 U.S. adults it polled. What TV operating system dominates the primary set in your house, the one you watch the most? It's still Roku, 37%. What I thought was interesting is Vizio, I think it's called SmartCast now, rebranded by Walmart amid
Let's just say rebranded, but not smartly rebranded. That's the most anodyne. It's the most anodyne name in the universe, right? SmartCast.
Well, you're in there in your overalls to pick up some laundry detergent and beer. You pick up a Roku or
not to stereotype the millions and millions of customers who come to Walmart every day around the world.
I'll be honest, I've had nothing but good experiences in Walmart.
And I will tell you, Sam Walton was an alum of my university. His children and grandchildren have blessed my university multiple times over. And I remember the day Walmart came to my hometown. And to be frank about it, kind of blew up our downtown. It's still there. Still's the downtown. Downtown's a lot cuter now, though. Got to say that, too. Anyway, so Walmart was supposed to win.
What else are you talking about?
Hub
TVOS. They own 3% of the market.
That's smart. That's really smart. They're casting about.
Can I talk now?
Yes.
So they control 3% of the TVOS market. Other predictions from other independent data sources, specifically Omdia, predicted this sort of hockey stick where they would own 13% of the market and take off and dominate the North America over the next 5 years, while Roku would ride the roller coaster down, down, down. This was a chart that was released in January of this year. And Hub isn't the only data set that I've seen. Parks Associates released something recently that sort of told the same story. Nothing has really changed in U.S. TVOS. Agreed upon generally as a very important part of the streaming wars because it's gateway control to the living room. You control the data, you control advanced advertising, you control home automation. People get up
merchandising,
merchandising,
all the looper stuff that we sometimes talk about. The virtual end caps and these things. It is a big deal. I think what's interesting here is these conversations between Roku and Walmart / Vizio are kind of North American centric, right? Because Roku doesn't really get out of Mexico, Canada, U.S., particularly U.S. Vizio traditionally, before the takeover, was basically U.S. Walmart is in a lot of places that are no longer this continent. They've expanded, but I don't know what the footprint of Vizio /
Yeah, it's entirely different market in Europe. Samsung owns it, but there's upstarts. LG is a big competitor in that area.
You got to figure
Google kind of
Android
plays
slash
everywhere.
Google TV. Yeah, they play everywhere, right? So it's a different beast completely. And there's other random ones. I think our friends over at TV have a
There's Vada,
no
whatever you call it,
the da the
yeah.
da.
So what's interesting is Apple made some noise a few weeks ago. They jacked up the price of the Apple TV 4K, which is like,
Along with all
you
of
know,
their other, most of their other
right.
devices. I mean, they're feeling the effects like everybody else who makes hardware of
Well, their
the
most
RAM
premium,
emergency. Yes,
the Cadillac, I guess, the BMW. What's the
I would say it's
best
the
streaming
BMW,
device you could buy?
the BMW M3 or the Maybach if you really want to get fancy. It's the Maybach Mercedes. That's pretty up there.
$250 previously, $400 now for the 128 gigabyte version. So
So
RAM
some
is
of
very
that,
pricey.
yeah, RAM's
So
pricey, but some of this though, just to be clear, some of this with Apple is beefing up devices to be able to do not just streaming, but AI, and not just AI, but AI in smart homes. So they're requiring more capacity, like much more than you need. And it's interesting that Roku is completely the opposite because everything's up in the cloud and they got a bunch of like $25, dongles still
not
functional.
anymore. Their cheapest streaming stick, the Roku streaming stick. Talk about clever branding. It was $30, now $40.
Yeah, that's a 30%. That's one third.
The premium stream bar, which I think is a load of junk because it might broke and does this weird thing where it cuts out during the middle of important Game 7 contest. It was $100. It's $150 now. So this
That's a
RAM thing,
50% hike. Yeah,
yeah,
it's hitting everything.
or they're using an excuse to have hit everything. But those are some
Well,
major.
those are big bites, and I don't see that getting better. I mean, to some extent, I suspect this is a little bit like what happened with inflation. I don't know, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. Everybody else is raising prices. I better raise while I can. My cost of goods is getting higher, but also I'm going to cloak whatever profit taking I want to get within a reaction to the broader market, which is going on. So it feeds on itself. So there's
Right.
that. I mean, it's a crazy thing. So it's hard to tell some of that, but Apple's doing this, and that if look, they never do stuff cheap. But that Apple TV, it is important. Like, for instance, they say if you want to do smart home functionality, you have to have the 2 terabyte Apple Home subscription folded into their highest end subscriptions to be able to do this stuff. And whether that's true or not, that's what they're saying. And some of that makes sense as you got a lot of bandwidth and a lot of smarts that you're pushing out across your network of devices and stuff controlled by, we can only hope, a smarter, more capable Siri. So it'll be interesting to see. But they haven't updated that Apple 4K device in a long time, and the one
4
they
years.
updated was really just a mild bump up in specs on one that was a couple of years older than that. So it's a great box. I have one of my main my main screen in the living room. It's a great box. Use it as my interface with Charter. And in fact, got it through Charter as their box for their customers in that era. And now I guess they're doing Zumo.
One thing about that study that I thought, the Hub study that I thought was interesting, another part was that there's this assumption that people don't give a shit about their TV OS. They buy a smart TV or a streaming stick based on price and convenience or whatever. And I think that may have been true at one point, but I think it's less so now. I think, a decade into the streaming revolution, people kind of have preferences. They know what works for them, what doesn't. And there are qualitative differences. It's interesting that the on-screen kind of influencer category, what UX drives the most on-screen action in terms of people clicking on an ad. Apple's interface far and away delivers the most bang for the buck. So
they
that's
probably
also
deliver fewer ads too, though. I mean, it's interesting to think about that because they typically, like Apple TV, other than sports, doesn't have ads, right? So
that's true.
So there's fewer ads. So the ones you see, are probably pretty well targeted, probably pretty well, but also it's just fewer of them. They stick out more. Just guessing.
Anyway.
But possibly true. But this is interesting to see what they do with that. So
I wanted to talk to you about this news last week about Paramount. They're not even going to wait for preliminary injunction. They're just saying, okay, let's just go to trial. We'll put the whole thing off until next year. We'll talk to our lawyers, do some discovery, and come back at you. I find that baffling because, one, they have to pay the ticking fee that we were all talking about for all these months. Two, I mean, if you get a preliminary injunction, you're going to have to wait for a trial anyway. Why not spin the wheel? What is going on?
it's interesting to see that they're doing that. It makes the decision to sue Amazon over contract infringement basically to poach, apparently, not just a HBO Max executive, but executives across other places. They've got to keep operating for a while. They're not going to close this in 6 weeks or 2 months.
Right, or ever.
Actually, end of September is only 66 days away as we record this. Right around the corner, particularly on the legal calendar. So maybe they're just saying, we're going to have to swallow it and we got 7.5x debt load or whatever, and we're just going to have to get through. I mean, maybe they've just decided to do that. I can't figure out, just kind of staring at it from a distance, why you would do that unless you just thought, well, the TRO is just more time. All right, let's just get the process rolling. It's just going to be what it's going to be. If we get a TRO, then we have to come back with that instead of just like set this thing trial and knock the sucker out and hope that we get an intervention from DOJ or DJT or somebody. Maybe that's their thinking. So we'll see how that rolls. I don't know who their savior is going to be on that.
What can the executive branch of the United States of America do versus the courts at this point? I mean, it's a legal matter, not a regulatory.
It is a legal matter. We have seen the Trump administration be quite imaginative in the ways they try to apply pressure on state governments to do a lot of things. And some of that is baldly inappropriate, unconstitutional, illegal, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And some of it's just just think back to those halcyon first days when they made some universities, some law firms, some et cetera, bend the knee and do some news organizations, do some dumb settlement because Cherry Redstone, and speaking of Paramount, doing that settlement of a wildly specious lawsuit because she desperately needed to get a deal done. Maybe they're just waiting for leverage to come along that might come in, a bank shot. You can't always see those things coming. So
a year buys you time for something to happen. But my point is, you'd get that anyway if they slap a preliminary injunction on you. You're going to trial anyway. I guess I don't understand enough about the process to understand what you get by not spinning the wheel. It seems like.
Well, if you're not sitting around defending the TRO and having to really display some of your case before you want to, because that's kind of what you have to do in the TRO process, the injunction process, you have to kind of argue out your case in broad strokes without giving away everything. But you have to argue out your case, and the judge then kind of goes, okay, these guys have a shot at prevailing, and therefore we will put in place, given the possibility of irreparable harm, we will put in place a hold harmless order that keeps that from happening while this case plays out during the pendency of the case. That's ultimately what goes on. So they may, despite their brave talk about, we're closing this deal before September's end. Maybe they took a harder look at that and said, this might be more complicated than we want to get into. And they're just trying to cut time as much as they can and get to the part that matters and go from there. That's a guess. I think the poaching thing suggests that employees are not waiting around to get laid off, and perhaps in somewhat larger numbers than have been understood. And as I mentioned in the newsletter, when I was at MGM and a collection of private equity companies, Comcast and Sony, were buying MGM mostly for the library at a time when they thought we would still have a really big home entertainment business for years to come, given its huge library of movies and TV shows. MGM, Kirk Kerkorian, bless him, who sold MGM 3 times, made money, 3 times, including $2 billion, half of which was tax-free on that last time, made sure that there were provisions in there that everybody in the company was taken care of. Everybody in the company, if you served a year, you got 6 months pay for every year you served, which was a lot of money for some people because there were some long-timers who'd gone through God knows how many owners over the years.
Where are the Kirk Kerkorians?
No, he was one of a kind. And worst of all for me, he did not like interviews at all and refused to cooperate on books and anything else because he had one of the great capitalism stories, life stories of all time. So it's a great shame that it's inspirational. The greatest Armenian.
He didn't like to talk about himself. What's wrong with him?
Did not. He literally thought if you were giving money for something and wanted your name on it, that was not about philanthropy. That was about self-aggrandizement. And right,
what a dude!
Totally right. He gave something like $185 million to Armenia after the devastating, I think it was 1989 earthquake that hit Yerevan capital and was devastating to this tiny country. It's got 3 million residents. He gave $185 million back in 89, 90. Some like junior college went to put his name on it without his permission, and he made them take it down. I mean, that's how strongly he believed. It's like, no. I'm giving this to help you. Period.
Interesting.
So,
how many
that
years
being said,
for
the last 2 years of the Kerkorian era? Round 3.
So you've got a year of wages out of the thing.
Something like that. Yeah, it was about a year. And as I note in the story, I took a year off, drove around the country with my son for a few weeks, saw family and places I grew up with and shared that with him. And otherwise had a very fine time decompressing after 2 decades of insanity as a journalist and executive. It was great. I strongly recommend anybody who can do that. It's like a sabbatical, but even better because you didn't have to come back and write a paper.
And so then you decide, I'll just go back to Deadline and live the good life.
No, that was a little bit later, but I ended up going to USC after that. And then after that, consulting, and ended up in somewhat unlikely circumstances. Thank you, Madeline Hammond. Eventually at Deadline, consulting with them for 4 insane years. Back in the maelstrom. So that being said, I do want to say, speaking of journalism or quasi-journalism things, Pat McAfee, the former punter and entertaining influencer slash podcaster slash now ESPN personality, upon which the worldwide leader has placed not only a great deal of hope and care, but a fat $60 million a year plus contract, admitted on air it was insider trading. He got tips from Shams Charania, the NBA insider, who
about LeBron going to Philadelphia.
About LeBron going to Philadelphia, not Cleveland, not Miami, not Minnesota, not these other places that were noised about, not Golden State. There was a lot of betting going on, which is a dumbass thing for people to do, but you know how I feel about gambling. He knew it was going to be Philadelphia.
You've been talking about this for a while as kind of it's a slow train wreck that ESPN, which controls the gateway to all of our major leagues, they're in deep with DraftKings. It's a big part of their revenue stream now. Jeff Pearlman, the former Sports Illustrated baseball writer, who's really prolific now as a creator. I've seen him everywhere on social this week, and he had this segment this week in which he shows how McAfee just mentions it like what he did the night before, like it was nothing. I guess when you have the White House, betting on everything and gaming markets, it's you're not too worried about what is being discovered.
Well, more than that, it's not just the White House, particularly possibly insiders of the White House betting on inside information about, I don't know, when the bombing is going to start up again. Remember that 2 of the prediction markets have a senior advisor, Donald Trump's oldest son. And on one of those, he, I think, serves on the board. I believe that's correct. Kalshi and Polymarket. So, which is regulated not by states under the Supreme Court laws that freed up states to allow or not allow gambling for sport as they chose.
Well, it's sort of
like a landmark decision.
It's everything. It's like the kind of corruption of gambling and prediction markets colliding with what ESPN has suddenly become over time. They keep having wave after wave of layoffs. They just had another one.
Right.
At the same time, they commit their money to figures like Stephen A. Smith and Pat McAfee. And listen,
it's McAfee. But that being said, look, the point is that is the transformation of the business.
Dave.
Yes, or McAfee. But
McAfee,
so he's actually a drink at McDonald's. Yes, they have huge followings. That's the key.
Just because I'm not into them doesn't mean there's something that's not in it for somebody. And there are a lot of smart people who like these guys. And I want to be careful how I denigrate them. But I personally don't see how one Pat McAfee, did I say it right, is worth $60 million. And fuck all, who has Cam Newton and all his funny outfits. I get more out of that. They laid him off this week. So they're not a journalistic institution. They're an institution of blowhards, people who take themselves like Stephen A. Smith really seriously. Really a presidential run? Come on, I guess.
Yeah, well, that's just him being egotistical. But they had other blowhards before those guys. I mean, some of the Stephen A. Smith fencers, people that were always arguing with him, including Ryan Clark, who got in trouble here and there and now is unemployed. These guys, just to be clear, these guys were making a couple million each by all accounts. Their contracts were not teeny tiny. But what's different here is you're right. Back in the day, and I always sort of measure this and kind of respect ESPN for this. They had a bunch of female sports correspondents, Linda Cohn and Doris, what her name is, a whole bunch of Doris Burke, thank you, who are super smart, super prepared, really know their stuff. But unlike so many on other networks, they were not, shall we say, pageant ready. They were allowed, like the dudes, to get older and look like they were older because they knew their stuff. Now, Linda Cohn's, I think, retiring in the middle of some health scares. Some of these others, and Cohn got...
They still have Ramona Shelburne.
They still have Ramona. And look, all those are fantastic. But that, to me, was emblematic of a belief that it was important you knew your stuff. You just weren't given a loudmouth take on everything, being followed by the bros. And so I thought the fact that they, unlike, say, Fox, actually had really smart women who were allowed to look like human beings was in their favor. It was like, you take this stuff seriously.
Well, I feel like if they get to their 45th, 50th birthday, the little light goes off in their hand like Logan's Run, and it's over for them. And I think that'll...
It's actually called Pitaro's Run.
It's always been a network. SportsCenter's always been full of big journalistic personalities.
Yeah. But they were always Sharp. What's his name?
Olbermann was always, but they were like...
But Olbermann got run out. Just be clear. Olbermann got run off.
He's been run out everywhere. But my point is that they were always... They didn't get too big, and they were always journalists at the core. And now it's just like, I gotta tell you, Stephen A. Smith does nothing for me. Everything he argues just seems performative, and I don't know what his point is half the time. And he seems to take the wrong one just because he wants attention most of the time. It's taking a dark turn.
Yeah, the way his cadence of delivery feels very performative, even if he's got a good point. It just feels like he's and it's like, okay. But yes, those are the guys, though, that command big audiences, that can write books and sell, that can do podcasts, show up on air 5 times a day, 17 days a week. Those are big audiences. They're audience movers in ways that Carl Ravitch wasn't, for instance, one of the laid off people who I always thought was great and really sharp on baseball, for what it's worth. They saved themselves a bunch of money by laying all those guys off and a whole bunch of behind the scenes people as they get smaller and smaller. So then it becomes who can command an audience, who's a star, not just a smart person who works for us. And of course, that's why we're now podcasters, because you and I can move an audience, right?
Well, a very influential one, Dave.
Very highly focused and influential audience.
Speaking of companies that move highly focused, influential audience. Netflix got a cease and desist letter. I don't know if you saw this from Kalshi, because they're running this documentary starting tonight called The Prediction Game, which looks at prediction markets. Specifically, in the case of Kalshi, they ran a trailer on Friday that showed a group of young 20-somethings. Well, 20-something is young by definition. You'd say young, Dan. Partying in Las Vegas last weekend.
Yeah.
Come on. I know my baby puppies. Yes, Pastor. So they're all partying in Las Vegas, betting on the World Cup final, most of them on Spain. Good for them. But Kalshi's point is, and this is their lead litigators, and no way this could happen with us. We wouldn't issue those receipts because they show a receipt, I guess, in the trailer. We're not legally able to have prediction betting on sports in Nevada. It was just outlawed. That wouldn't be us. So you must have fabricated this. So
if it's a prediction market, Nevada can outlaw it all at once. My understanding is the feds still supersede because federal primacy. So if the feds allow it, I mean, maybe that's true, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn here, but regardless of the details of that lawsuit, they must be feeling a little nervous that there's growing awareness of some of the problematic stuff going on around this, and the fact that Nevada, the most highly attuned state to the gambling business for obvious reason, is taking action at the legislative level and willing to go to court means a whole set of headaches for them that they're going to have to deal with aggressively. Good luck. Hey, would you like to bet on the possible outcome of that lawsuit?
Have you ever placed a Kalshi bet?
I'm not a gambling man. I have many sins and many vices, but most of them are fairly well contained here in my dotage, and gambling was never one of them. I remember talking years ago to these dudes talking about, how much they loved NFL games over college, and what it boiled down to, and this is long before any of this stuff was legal, was the fact that they could bet on it. Basically, they had a bookie that would take their bets on pro stuff, and they wouldn't take it on like Alcorn State against Tarleton State. So that made it much more interesting to them. It's like, well, if it's only the gambling thing, I tell people, look, don't gamble. Take the money you'd spend on gambling and invest in the stock market. Buy SPY or some big ETF that's broad in the market, and just put $10 a month there and watch it grow. There's an idea.
I'll get to that in a second. There was something I wanted to say about Fubo and the stock market. But yeah, I did a parlay bet when I was in my 20s in Las Vegas, and I put out.
You're still paying for it.
It was like $300, and it looked like I was going to link together 3 wins, a 3-team parlay, and I was going to make a lot of money. I think it was like close to $10,000. And because Oregon missed a field goal against Oregon State, I ended up, on the wrong side.
$300. Yeah.
It wasn't a big deal, but I thought I was rich.
Yeah, you thought you were rich. You were counting that money already. For what it's worth, kids, parlay bets are the worst. Only a couple of % of those come through, which is why the payouts are so big. So your chances of winning are very low. So don't. Figure out some other way. There are other ways if you're going to gamble. Play craps. At least your odds are decent.
I, like a lot of ill-advised people, put $2,000 down at the height of Fubo. This must have been 4 or 5 years ago. And
this is not the height of FOMO. This is the height of Fubo.
Fubo, the virtual pay TV operator, now mostly owned by Disney.
70% Disney owned, yeah.
The stock cratered and never came back. Disney made a major investment. I didn't realize until I went through my portfolio recently that when they did that, they diluted the shares so that my existing investors like me just got hammered. We'll never get that money back. So when you said my friend David Gandler, I think, David, he might not be a very good friend.
Some people named David are less good friends than other people named David. That's all I have to say about it.
All friends David aren't the same. That's true. So
he's debasing the David currency, though. The bastard. I get the sense he's enough of a rough and ready sort of fellow that he may not care that much as he giggles all the way to his Cabo mansion or something.
I probably did okay, but
they paid him to go away. They put somebody in there that isn't going to pee on the people at Disney. now that they own it, 3/4 almost.
Yeah.
Speaking of people who shouldn't count on help, you had some complicated but interesting stuff about Charter, Starlink, Elon, and virtual MVNOs, that smashing term used in the telecom business that keeps all the rest of normal human beings from understanding what the hell's going on. So talk to me about what is the deal here. Is Charter going to help him or not?
Well, let's start with the big three, AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, all of which have said we're not going to lease our networks to Elon Musk and SpaceX, which need, and we've discussed this at length, they need a terrestrial broadband network, a wireless 5G network to get their signal.
To fill in the gaps in the urban areas in particular. They just don't have literally the bandwidth within their devices.
Right. If you're living
in the rural areas, but not in the urban area.
If you're on a ranch in Montana, Wyoming, great. D2 satellite is what you need. But if you're in an urban area where it's a lot more dense, you got buildings, you got, things overhead, you need, start to get to you. Starlink is going to need a traditional radio-based tower network. And they're either going to have to build it or lease one. And the major wireless operators have said, we're not going to do it. Coming into last week's earnings reports from both AT&T, Verizon, T-Mobile, they all reported, and each of them said, now that the SpaceX stock is way down, and Elon's, his Musk is a little bit diluted.
He's no longer as musky. He stinks a bit, but he's no longer as musky. I like.
So T-Mobile standpoint is they asked about, what do you think about them going around you and teaming with somebody like Charter, which leases the Verizon network and has a bunch of other, CBRS is another technology. They use their Wi-Fi network. They, kind of cobble together resources to create a wireless business. And what if, Starlink was to use that, and Verizon's take was that can never happen. It's not contractually possible.
It's not technically subcontractually possible, is how I read that. So they can't turn around, they can't contract for X amount of wireless bandwidth and all these markets, blah, 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 which is what they do for Charter and Comcast and Cox. Now it's about to become part of Charter, and then turn around and sell it on a retail basis at a nice margin. They buy it wholesale, sell it on a nice margin, but they can't turn around and sell it also to somebody downstream as another competitor, i.e. Starlink, according to their contracts. So that's interesting.
Yeah, it was Dan Schulman, the CEO of Verizon. There's no backdoor.
And he's still new. He's been there
There's
like
no backdoor to our
months.
network.
Right.
And then they asked Charter about it, the talks, because according to Bloomberg, there were conversations. And CEO Chris Winfrey said, yeah, we talked to a lot of people. We're trying to, run a business here, and doesn't mean we're going to do it. And doesn't mean we have anything to announce. So what I thought was interesting about all
that
this.
Feels like smoke, if not fire, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think, very quickly we went from and I implicate myself as being one of many who followed along. Elon Musk's going to take over telecom. Just 2-3 weeks later, the stock is down from like $202 to $115, and nobody's talking that way anywhere.
Then they got to 225, and now it's down at 100-ish. So 225 was his peak.
Of telecom business had been saying all along, yeah, well, we're not worried about it. We're not gonna lease our networks, and everything will be fine. And you got to kind of,
that's interesting, because I can see why they would be unhappy about that happening. But I also have to think that if if Charter and Comcast could find a way to wiggle around that and did it, that AT&T and Verizon and T-Mobile would see that as an abrogation of contracts and cut them off, so they no longer have the fastest growing part of their business, right? I mean, that would be a possibility, I would think.
Craig Moffett was on CNBC 2 weeks ago talking about this very issue, and he didn't even really bring up the possibility of cobbling something together outside of like buying one of these companies. The only recourse,
you got enough stock, it's worth $2 trillion or whatever Elon's bloviating about now. So just give them like twice what they're worth, 6 times what they're worth, whatever, and boom, you've got a network. Just buy Verizon, right? That's what he's basically saying. That's your
You
option.
say your option is to build a network, and it takes a decade and a ton of money. He didn't. What I
Charlie
wanted to
Ergen
ask about,
available to help advise them on that. I understand he's going to have some spare time to help advise on building networks.
Yeah, I wonder how much of that stuff is still in the ground and
Right.
on towers,
Right.
and it's a lot of stuff has to happen before this business gets overrun by SpaceX, which makes me feel good. So I tell you who's feeling great are young people in the film business about AI. You wrote about that.
Yeah.
A lot of optimism.
Yeah,
there.
this company, I don't even know how to say their name. Filma Stage, did a study of 1,000 people in the film business, and in the middle of all the consolidation, the difficulties finding work, lots of people are feeling way underpaid, way overworked, a little threatened by AI, but not quite as much as I thought. That was less of an issue in some ways than just the hours are crazy. It's not going to get better when, David Ellison lays off half of whatever his combined company ends up being called. It's not going to get better for those folks. They're not going to get big raises out of that. Like, it's the sort of thing that makes, bartending and real estate look pretty good. Traditional fallbacks for everybody in Hollywood.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see how many more real estate agents we could absorb in California when we're not building any houses. But that being said, I did find it interesting. And the AI component of that does have another part to it, which is there's a real split between those who are using AI, about half have, say that they have, and those who don't and are afraid it's coming for them. And like 40% are okay with it, actually, and figuring out how to use it. But the ones that don't like it on an age basis, an age cohort basis, far and away, the ones who think that they're likely to get replaced by it are the youngest workers, the 20 to 21 to 30 or whatever, 20 to 30 age group, because they're the ones that are having their jobs replaced already. Right.
Right.
I mean, the thing about what AI is doing now is it's taking away that bottom part of the pyramid that is going to be the kids, the assisted film editors and the production assistants and the writing room note taker and et cetera, et cetera. All those jobs are going away. But those were the entry level job that fed into the pyramid to train the people to run the company in 20 years. And that's going away. So all those jobs for 23-year-olds are really in danger.
Well,
and those are the kids who really hate AI.
At the Cinerama Dome, which
Yes.
I didn't know until reading you, is back. It shut down during the pandemic. The historic.
Well, it'll be back in a year and a half. But yes, it's coming back.
So tell me about ArcLight, because I want to ask you,
Yeah.
let me just, before you get into this, one of my favorite exhibition houses was the ArcLight Culver City, on the Culver, Washington. Forget, you know where it is.
Yes, downtown Culver City, around
shut down
down the street from Amazon.
Yeah. ArcLight never came back after the pandemic. So what's happening now?
Well, so ArcLight was initially a film lover's paradise. They kind of helped pioneer the whole assigned seat thing. They had an excellent little restaurant in their complex that was redeveloped out of a whole bunch of ugly-ass, empty parking lots on Sunset Boulevard in the heart of Hollywood, next to the Cinerama Dome, one of the great film palaces of the last 100 years.
Sure,
Cinerama
I had
Dome was
$20
based on
cocktails before Minority Report. I vividly remember it.
Yes. So what? You were paying $15 to get a guaranteed seat in your specific place. They made a point coming in beforehand. Say, if you have problems with audio, if you're having other problems, I'm Melanie. Find me out I'll be waiting outside if you have any issues, and we will take care of it.
Concierge.
Yeah, they had great concessions. They had incredibly comfortable seats. There were a couple of the screens in the 14-screen complex that ArcLight had. A couple of screens would serve alcohol in the evenings, like for grown-ups, things like that. So it was about before the rest of the business said, we ought to have a better experience for our customers so they want to come back. ArcLight was doing it. Now, it was a division of Pacific, at least by the end. I don't know if it started out that way. And Pacific got killed by the pandemic. They probably got out over their skis in terms of their real estate contracts and stuff like that. So the pandemic hits, nobody can go to the theaters, nobody can pay $15 or whatever it ends up being for, name your seat for a year and a half, and Pacific didn't survive. So from March of 2020 to now, it has remained not just the Cinerama Dome, which dates back, I think, to 56. I think that's correct. And it was a new kind of ultra wide screen, wide format screen in a geodesic dome that was very Buckminster Fullerish, fantastic, one of my favorite dudes of all time. The screen is 86 feet long. And so for ultra wide screen formats like Panavision 70, when you're watching, I don't know, Lawrence of Arabia and the trackless wastes of the Middle East, and a camel riding person coming towards you through the shimmering heat, seeing that wrap around your head, it's like, who needs IMAX? Nobody. This
I saw
is
in
it.
79. My dad took me to see Apocalypse Now. I was like 11, and
Wrap around Apocalypse.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
he liked it.
Yeah. I mean, it is literally one of the great houses. But what's really promising is, so two bits that I think are really interesting. One, this deal is happening because Sony is making it happen. Cinerama Dome. Sony, which does not have a major streaming service. Crunchyroll's great, but it's not a major streaming service. It's a very special one, specific and
it's a niche
and limited. It's a niche streaming service. Great business, great, whatever. They don't have a general streaming service, and they don't have a broadcast network, but they're going to go ahead and invest in this as kind of a flagship. The other 14 screens that were the ArcLight screens around the Cinerama Dome are going to be all run by Alamo Drafthouse, which is, for film geeks, heaven, because they do all kinds of crazy stuff. Like, they have their own film festival featuring horror craziness.
Right.
And
I've never
Fantastic
been.
Fest.
I will
It's called
not.
Fantastic Fest. They're out of Austin originally.
Right.
For film geeks of everything from Grindhouse. They're like the Quentin Tarantino of theater chains in terms of their appreciation for all these weird little corners of the cinema business over the last 100 years. So they're going to be operating stuff with lots of, revival screenings and
this is 2028 when it's not going to be ready till then, right?
They're going to start renovations because, it's been shut down for 6 years. That's not good for a business, right? So they got to do some renovations. They're starting them next month. It'll take into early 28 to get it fully ready to open up. But finally, this beautiful temple. And what's interesting too is that whole complex was routinely among the top 10 grossing film complexes in the country before it shut down. It was enormously successful.
Yeah, it's still a tourist destination, and when you go out there, you see a movie at the Dome. That's sort of part of the process.
So it used to have, Amoeba Records used to be next block over, so you'd totally nerd out and you'd go over there and maybe you'd get some used CDs and a DVD of Kill Bill 2 or something. And then you go watch the movie, and maybe you go in their little bookstore area, gift shop area, and get some cool movie related thing, and you have a drink afterward. I mean, it was a film lovers thing, and it is coming back, but with Sony and Alamo Drafthouse. So
film lover. Have you seen The Odyssey yet?
No, I have not.
I keep saying I'm going to do it. Tomorrow's the day.
It's over. It's approaching 700 million worldwide.
Christopher Nolan can make a movie.
Go woke, never go broke, I guess.
I the more I read about that, the more absurd it is. I mean, it's
Well, Elon's promising a all AI Odyssey that is factually accurate by the end of the year, created by a component of Grok, his also ran AI program, known mostly for its nude imagery and occasional neo-Nazi impulses. So if you think they're not wearing very much now, wait till you see what Cersei's dressed like in this thing. but that's coming out later in the year. What's interesting is there's another
I saw
AI-only
that.
film coming from a guy who he's an engineer, grew up in England, Persian or Iranian born, but grew up in England, made a film called Dreams of Violet, which was quite celebrated, appeared at the Tribeca Film Festival earlier in the spring. It was a Iranian resistance film, but made out of AI and got a lot of attention and love. And now he's doing this thing with his brother. The producer is Tom Rogers, the guy who founded CNBC and was the first president of NBC Cable, then ran Prime Media and ran TiVo, I guess, of all things. And so Tom Rogers is the producer on this. So they're expressly, he was like very respectful. He says, look, not trying to take anything away from Christopher Nolan. We're going to wait till the end of the summer. What he does in an older way, he's brilliant. We don't want to get any way of that. But I want to show what's possible with these new world tools to make this 135-minute film, which is about half the length of what Nolan made, for considerably less than the $250 million he reportedly spent to make The Odyssey. This is called Odysseus: The Fall. And we have in the newsletter a little trailer from it.
I just wonder if, the experience part of it is like identifying actors that you kind of have a relationship with and watching them sort of melt into the role. And I don't want to dismiss. I've never really bought into a full length AI completely generated feature before, but before I go in, I'm sort of skeptical based on that. There's just no.
Well, it's early enough in the process. You should be skeptical. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with you saying, well, we'll believe it when we see it. But the point is, again, what comes out now is the worst it will be from now on. It will get better. It will get better. Doesn't mean it's good now, but it'll probably get better.
We have to wind up, but I wanted to ask you, as the resident film guy, about something I saw on Peacock last night. It was a mid-budget sort of character study called Pressure. It was about the run-up to D-Day. Brendan Fraser stars as Eisenhower. He wants to make a decision, go or don't go, based on the weather.
Dwight Eisenhower, yes.
Dwight Eisenhower. What did I say, Mickey Eisenhower?
No, Dwight Eisenhower, after whom the Eisenhower Medical Center out near your spouse's mother's house out in the Coachella Valley is named, because he used to hang out there and play golf when he retired. He liked the sun after Normandy. So it's a terrific film.
Yeah. It seems like, I saw one critic ding it like it's just about the weather. It's just nothing happens. And there's very little.
Byron Allen's favorite movie. Because, yeah, because he's going to run it on the Weather Channel. Okay, that's just a joke.
Okay, all right. Well, I didn't see the connection right away, Dave. You're kind of a
sometimes you got to connect dots because it's an obscure joke. But anyway, okay. I thought it was kind of funny. It's kind of off the top of my head. But it's a good film.
My first question. This is Focus Features, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So it's sort of like, and they're release it with direct to streaming. This is the
no, it got a theatrical run. A short one, but it got a theatrical. Yeah. I mean,
it was good to see a mid-budget.
Closer to, it's good to see them, right? Something like that used to be the meat and potatoes for the theaters, right?
Right. It was good. It wasn't great, but it was good.
Yeah, solid film. And yes, it's about, do you commit hundreds of thousands of troops to the largest amphibious assault in the history of man? Or do you wait to see if the weather forecast for a horrible storm that could do a Spanish Armada, wipe out your invasion on you, comes true or not? That's pressure, buddy. High pressure, low pressure. This is high pressure. Speaking of high pressure, Peacock learned how to fly financially.
Yes, about time they made a little profit on that enterprise.
So, six years worth of quarters of red ink.
All it took was the NBA playoffs, the FIFA World Cup, and what's their reality series, Love Island?
Love Island. And also, I don't think it's remiss to say probably some leftover signups from Olympics in February, right? There's people who signed up in Q1.
Legendary February.
Legendary February with the NBA All-Star Game and the Super Bowl and the Olympics. And there's probably people that just forgot to cancel who were still there in Q2. And then they found NBA playoffs. They found World Cup Telemundo, Spanish language, which was setting record viewership, including on Peacock. And they found Love Island, which is a dumb as a rock, but lots of beautiful people wearing virtually nothing, having sex with each other secretly, but not that secretly.
Well, it took 24 quarters since launch in 2020 for Peacock to achieve profitability. Zaslav and the Grim Weeds are, due to their cost cutting mainly. HBO Max achieved it in less than half the time, 11 quarters.
It's also worth saying it's worth saying that HBO Max had a lot better programming than Peacock had. Peacock has been filling in some of its sports rights, great, but it did not have anything original on there to speak of. There were a couple of things like The Flight Attendant and things like that, but very little original programming, nothing at the level of any average week on Casey Bloys' operation. So that helped. But you're right. Cut costs, still make great stuff.
Speaking of Zaslav and that era, they debuted the final trailer for Coyote vs. Acme this week. And
finally. Talking about something taking multiple quarters.
It's a hilarious looking movie. I've said it before the last time they released the trailer. Finally, next month, this thing comes out. We'll actually get to see it, but it looks funny.
I'll be interested actually because the thing is, I grew up watching 4-minute, 5-minute Coyote versus not Acme, but the Roadrunner shorts. Beautiful stuff, a slapstick, but it's 4 or 5 minutes, not 90 or 100 minutes. So it'll be interesting to see if the thing that works fantastic for 5 minutes works for 95 minutes. So what
was it? You have Space Jam. You had with Jerry Seinfeld's thing with Pop-Tarts. That worked on a gag. Well, it didn't work on a gag, but others have tried. I think if you have the right comedians and the right material, maybe it works out. I'll reserve judgment until I actually see it.
We'll see if it works or if they fall off a cliff and an anvil falls on their head.
So before an anvil falls on mine, because we made too long a podcast, let's sing us out.
Let's wrap this puppy up.
Yeah.
So just a reminder to everybody, Daniel and I will be working the hallways at IBC in mid-September. We are open to sponsorship inquiries. Let's just say desperately open, but I'm very happy to have some sponsors to take along with us for the Daily Show newsletter we'll be putting out and the Daily Show podcast we'll be putting out together and probably with others. You can watch this show, find this show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and YouTube. You can get our twice-a-week newsletter at Next TMT, as in technology, media, and telecom, nexttmt.com, for free. Twice a week, we have all kinds of stuff, data and card observations, occasional humor that's almost funny. Check it out. Write us, sign up, like, comment, share, and subscribe. We love you all very much. It's David Bloom and Daniel Frankel saying over and out.